Welcome to another edition of the Morning Briefing. I'm Jeff DeForest here on NoFilter.net, along with one Mike Lubitz, a very pessimistic, despondent, a very psychotically destroyed Mike Lubitz today as a Cinderella story. It looked like it was about to go up in smoke and is on the precipice of absolute catastrophic disaster. In fact, he started out this morning singing, "When the music's over, turn out the lights." He went Jim Morrison on me on this Marlins game yesterday. As the baseball playoffs got underway with the wild card round, it was just glorious if you're a baseball fan. Four games on, a couple of them sort of overlapped. I guess the afternoon game, it all started out about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We saw one of our former Marlins, Pablo Lopez, with a real good representation of himself, had a good season. What was part of a big deal where Luis Arise came to the Marlins essentially for starting pitcher. He was the number 2 guy behind the Cy Young Award-winning Sandy Alcantara last year on the Marlins staff, which was a staff that distinguished itself nonetheless, in spite of the fact that the Marlins won a putrid 69 games last year. 69 stinking games. So they have a great season. They make their way into the postseason. They actually get in there as the number 5, not even the lowest seed. Arizona had that distinction. 50-1 to win the World Series. So expectations were not particularly high. And it is baseball, Lubie. And as we know, you can have a game like you had last night where the Marlins do not raise a gallop. For a 4-1 baseball game, that was one of those typical sporting events where you could apply the cliche. The final score was no indication of the overall just demonstration of dominance that the Philadelphia Phillies exhibited yesterday over the Marlins. And you were saying, it's over, my friend. It's over, Johnny. It's over. You're going Rambo. Why so pessimistic, Lubie? I mean, we all saw it. We witnessed it. The Phillies are dancing around the bases. They're mamboing around like one of those old mouse cartoons from way back where they were playing, and the scoreboard's rolling 101, 102. Only put up the 4 runs, but so it was not out of reach. And yet the feeble at-bats of the Miami Marlins made you think that their chances tonight are especially suspect. How did you feel about that?
Well, they didn't ever see Zach Wheeler well. And I know Zach Wheeler's become this consistent pitcher, but I don't remember him being Randy Johnson or, I don't know, Jacob deGrom. Like, he's a good pitcher, but they made him look like he was a freaking Hall of Famer. They had no shot last night. And you're right, it was 3-0. And I'm like, oh, it's over. And 3's not a lot of runs, but it just felt like it was done. They had nothing last night. It was just, I don't know, lethargic. I don't know what it was, but they were shell-shocked.
The crowd was dynamic last night, and a dynamic presence. If you ever wanted to talk about, I guess it would be a 10th man. We've got a short center fielder in there. We're in the beer league softball game, which doesn't Jake Berger, the Marlins third baseman, look like he'd be hitting cleanup for some steelworkers team? Yeah, we got the Ironman out there tonight. And he's done a nice job since coming over. A great acquisition by Kim Ng, who should be a candidate, as we mentioned a few times, the general manager, the only female general manager in North American professional sports.
Yes.
And should be a candidate for executive of the year, although there probably are going to be other teams with greater achievements overall, but really did a razor sharp job. It's interesting to me, Wheeler, the whole story with Wheeler, because if you think about the anatomy of a disaster when it comes to a franchise, look at the New York Mets. Wheeler was the odd man out when they had a rotation that consisted of Matt Harvey, who was all the rage in New York City, flamed out very quickly. Okay. Jacob deGrom, I mean, he's a Tommy John surgery waiting to happen there. He actually travels with, an orthopedic surgeon. That's the disappear. Is James Andrews still alive, man? This guy's never mentioned in conjunction. He was doing every surgery.
He's in his 80s, so I don't think he's still doing the surgeries, but he is alive, yes.
People, it didn't matter. Yeah, some Russian pole vaulter would be, in there with a torn ACL. Yeah, he's going to see Dr. James Andrews. So-and-so just had successful shoulder surgery. There it is. I stumbled over it myself. I was going to say, most difficult phrase in all of sports, successful shoulder surgery.
Nice.
That's the test for sportscasters. You go to the Newhouse Communications School, Syracuse University. You go to any communications place that's known for producing a lot of broadcasters. And they line you up in front of a wall there, and they point a gun to your head, and they say, successful shoulder surgery, 10 times faster.
Good luck.
And one surgery isn't successful.
You hope.
We're waiting for the day that the physician comes out of the operating room after, doing a knee or a shoulder or rotator cuff, Tommy John surgery and says, fuck, we butchered this.
I fucked that one up.
Oh my God, how did I even get a license?
Thank God he's alive.
You would have thought that they went to the medical school at the University of Guam and decided to have the surgery there. Aaron Rodgers will never walk again.
He's not playing again.
You never hear that, right? It's always successful shoulder surgery.
Yes.
Anyway, I mean, you had Matt Harvey, you had DeGrom, always injured. And now, I mean, just absolutely busting out the Rangers, who were victorious yesterday's financial budget. But nonetheless, for no performance, and who knows, does he ever come back, this guy? And they had Thor, I mean,
Noah Syndergaard.
Noah Syndergaard, wow. And then Steve Matz was the local kid. It's a kid from Queens here. Steve Matz, he's going to be the best of them all, I can assure you.
Yeah. Yep.
And Wheeler, they looked at, like he was the proverbial redheaded stepchild, and they just let him go. And since that time, he's been dynamite. So it just goes to show you, and you would have to think, I mean, look at the fate of the four pitchers, and the Mets, are still staggering around there, even with a gargantuan payroll. He ended up firing Mr. Baseball himself, Buck Showalter, a guy with seams on his foreheads. Got rid of him. But anyway, we went down in flames yesterday. I say we because we became huge fans of yet another Cinderella story being written in South Florida here, where we've had so much success in the team sport category this year. Mind-boggling. I've been living in this area for 42 years, never seen anything. And you couldn't have dreamt of anything like this. And then the Marlins, almost miraculously, as a nondescript bunch of baseball bag ladies, make their way into the postseason. And they kind of went out with a whimper there in last night's game. We had three other games on the slate, all of great interest. Texas beat Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, I mean, you talk about, just an exercise in futility. As great as they've been, Lubie, they set a record now for, the lowest attendance, I believe, in baseball postseason history.
I mean, they can't even get 20,000. Like, how can you not get
19 and change at the Blunder Dome for this game yesterday. And this was on a day where you saw, I didn't catch as much of the Milwaukee Brewers after getting off to an early start, actually were being humbled a little bit in that game against the Arizona Diamondbacks. So their crowd was kind of subdued. Their crowd reflected like the persona of Craig Counsell, who we're familiar with, where you're saying, is there a pulse there, Craig? What's going on? You talk about low key. Does he end up managing the Mets, Craig Counsell, now that they took that guy Stearns, and he's running the ball club?
I don't know. He seems to be pretty successful.
Would he turn his back? He seems perfectly suited for Milwaukee, too.
Man, they
Whereas
win.
the spotlight, the intense pressure of managing in New York, would you trade the Milwaukee Brewers job to become the Mets manager at any price if you were Craig Counsell? It's a good question.
I give some of these guys credit who are smart enough to just stay.
Yeah.
Like, you're in a good situation. Just stay.
Just stay there, right? You're making plenty of money, Joe. What do you want to go to this newfangled outfit for, huh? You want to try streaming? All right. Well, the key there is to be able to monetize it. We know this.
Thank you.
Been getting hit like we were Tex Cobb in the Larry Helms fight for the last couple of years, trying to find that spot. But so Texas humbles Tampa Bay in front of the most feeble crowd in playoff baseball history. Tampa Bay, a team that won 99 games this year, can't draw flies there in St. Petersburg. And guess what? In a stroke of genius, the city council has decided to build a new stadium at great expense to the county taxpayers and put it right back in the same spot. Across the fucking bridge. Everybody is 90 plus that lives in that area. I mean, including the neighboring Clearwater, where the water's clear because nobody's in it, because nobody can make it to the water from the parking lot to the beach. Walkers don't do well in the sand.
Jesus.
You would think the Alta Cockers of South Florida, though, would comprise a fairly decent foundation for a baseball fan base. And yet it's true in both cities here, Miami, that has Major League Baseball, and Tampa Bay, that it's been an outright failure. You would have to say, an all-time Dolly Parton bust. No, I mean, one of the biggest ever.
Well, and
Yeah.
both have had success. The Marlins have, in their own right, won 2 World Series, and the Rays are as
Yes.
consistent as any ball club. Yet neither can draw consistent fan support.
No, and the Marlins hadn't made in a legitimate. I mean, they had that one Fugazi playoff appearance there in
Yeah,
2020 when they only played 60 games, and they happened to do well that season. Had they played 162, I think you would have seen them, just eventually doing the Arazi shuffle and coming back to the pack. Although there's no way to decipher that, but in 2 real seasons, 162 game seasons, they made it to the postseason. That's out of 30.
Yeah.
Before this year. I'm so sad that you're writing their epitaph also. I can't help coming back to that. Literally, you've called a rabbi and a priest
The last rites
to watch the game with you. And by the 5th inning, you'll be watching Dancing with the fucking Stars. Unbelievable. Well, I really want to see if Adrian Peterson comes out there with a little stick.
Oh, Jesus.
All right, so Texas wins. Tampa Bay on the ropes, and it should be another lousy crowd again today. You would think they're not going to do any better in the second game of the series in that regard. And this was on a day where home crowds did make a big difference in Minnesota, I thought, and especially in Philadelphia, where they were going absolutely bananas. And I don't think a single person sat down the entire time. Minnesota wins over Toronto, and that broke. Wow. Nobody beats Vitas Garelitis 18 times in a row. One of the great lines ever uttered by anybody at a press conference in any sporting venue. And he was talking about, of course, how he had finally beaten Jimmy Connors after 17 straight losses to Connors. Vitas Garelitis, real character, great, greatly admired by many for his playboy tendencies. In addition to the fact that he was a very good tennis player, there's no question. That died tragically. Some hotel room had like one of these air conditioning units that was spewing carbon monoxide inside instead of, shifting it outside. And it was very unfortunate because this guy was a real, character back in the day in terms of standing out among what otherwise was. I don't. You couldn't say that the tennis players of that era were a dull crowd by any stretch of the imagination.
McEnroe
And Jimmy was pretty fiery too.
McEnroe and Connors definitely.
Pete Sampras was kind of boring, but he was so good you could tolerate it.
Courier was boring, but again,
did he ever marry that girl? He was going with the same girl. They always had the same shots of the same woman, Pete Sampras' girlfriend, and they were together for like years and years. Did he dump her after he retired? I don't know, and end up with some Playboy model. Not sure. She was quite attractive also, but Sampras, he was losing his hair there, a la Agassi. But definitely didn't have the persona, the personality, and the enthusiasm exuding as was the case with McEnroe.
He was with Bridget Wilson, and they got married back in 2000. So he must have been dating her around the time.
Yeah, could be.
They've been married for 23 years. So
steady as a rock, that Pete Sampras. Do you think the same syndrome has afflicted Pete Sampras and Bridget Wilson there that has afflicted most of us? And that is after a couple of years, Lubie?
Oh,
the
yeah.
indifference sets in, like you have
I'm sure.
with the South Florida sports teams. A total detachment from the belief, a suspension of belief that they could possibly do well. And Arizona over Milwaukee, they're 6-3 yesterday. So all of those teams that lost on the ropes and maybe on the slab, as you're expecting body bags for the Miami Marlins later on today. And, that would be unfortunate because I'm hoping they can at least force a little bit of drama in a game 3 where they would be clearly up against it as the baseball playoffs got underway. But good stuff. I mean, one of the nice things about baseball with all the strikeouts and everything, all the complaints, there's no balls in play, and it's just a home run or nothing. The fact that and here's a rule that was instituted that I think has made a tremendous difference in terms of the entertainment quotient being delivered and the ability to watch an entire baseball game. They shaved 24 minutes of time off of all games this year overall. 24 minutes. So the games are only taking like 2.5 hours. It's a lot more pleasant of a viewing experience. You can get into it. The action is condensed. Seems like, things are happening a lot more quickly. You don't have a guy scratching his balls there, stepping out of the batter's box, spitting on some bat boy, going to get the pine tar, takes a leak. Comes back, now the pitcher does the same thing. He's got the rosin bag. He's juggling it like he's on the Ed Sullivan show. It sped it up, and I think it made for a lot more enjoyable viewing if you were watching these baseball playoff games. Anxious to dive back in there. and do it again today. Any point spreads jump off the page at you as we get into the football weekend, Lubie? We got a Thursday nighter coming up. The Washington Commanders taking on the Chicago Bears. Would you not at this point, and people say don't get overwhelmingly, what's that?
And it's 5 and a hook too. I mean, I know
5 and a hook. Commanders at home against the Bears, who they managed to somehow choke their one opportunity to win a game so far this year against a lousy Denver Broncos team, who I'm expecting to come out and also lay an egg in this week's game. After did they just straighten themselves out? They are favored over the Jets.
Tonight, well, for me, tonight's game, or tomorrow night, I'm sorry, Thursday.
Oh, you have a pick of the week. You have your Gold Seal double wheel lock of the century.
I don't know about all that, but the Commanders pushed the Eagles as far as they could without winning.
Yeah.
And the Bears literally against a bad Broncos team had a nice lead and totally fell apart. And then the Bills and Jags, our buddy, the professor, and I, who we've had here on our attempts at License to Seal. The Bills coming off that win are now going out to London, which is like the Jags home away from home. They just played there, so they stayed there for 2 weeks, so they don't have to make the trip. They know that area really well. They know the times. They know all that, and the Jags need to win. They haven't played really well as a team that a lot of people thought could make a deep run in the playoffs. That's an interesting one. The Jags are getting 5 and a hook against the Bills, so I like that. That's like an overreaction to the Bills and the Dolphins. That could be a very interesting game.
Could be, yeah, and you would have to think that that's a huge edge. That I thought that was kind of odd. Are they making London like
they're trying
their part-time home?
They're trying. Well,
who the fuck wants to play 2 games in a row in Europe if you're in the National Football League? Except a team that's absolutely, as we were talking about with the baseball attendance here in the state of Florida, Jacksonville, an abysmal sports town in terms of support of the Jaguars there. I mean, they got a lousy stadium situation, but what else is there to do there? Go hunt wild turkey? I mean, what else do you do there? Well, let's go to the swamp, catch us some gators. What the fuck? That is hillbilly city up there. It's squat down like a pig is on the welcome sign to Jacksonville. Are we down in the state of Florida?
And we live here. That's the
Matt
thing.
Gaetz is likely to be our next governor. Maybe time to consider move to the Midwest. All right. Anyway, so I thought you were going to give out your game of. I mean, this is the steam of a lifetime here. We're good friends on the show with Mike McIntyre, coach at Florida International, an obscure game, and you loved them against New Mexico State on the road, getting 6 in a hook. Do you not?
The FIU's played pretty well this year so far, and it's a Wednesday night. They're showcased nationally, which you don't always get that spot. They're getting 6 in a hook.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens there. Anyway, we had a little freeze job working there with Mike Lubie. So you're going to stand behind that pick? Yes. Okay. Very good.
Yes, FIU tonight, 9 o'clock.
FIU getting 6 in a hook. A very generous 6 and how many times, people? Like a sword of Damocles, like Rambo shooting an arrow into some member of the Viet Cong. Just unbelievable. That hook will get you. It is a dagger in the game of degenerate life. All right, Lubie's pick. So we can go ahead and all of the hate mail, address it to Mike Lubitz. Florida International, his big selection of the century here over New Mexico State, getting 6.5 tonight. That's going to do it for the morning briefing. Hope you guys are up to date, and we'll be watching a lot of baseball today. I was reminded earlier this morning about the days that we used to play with the Japanese hardball, and it wasn't like Otani was using this. It was a buck, and you could buy a hardball, and other hardballs when I was growing up in Brooklyn, went in excess of $2-3. So we were always buying these Japanese hardballs, and what you didn't realize, you may as well be lighting up an exploding cigar. The minute a bat made contact with this ball, the seams busted, and it turned out instead of cork or any kind of wool or whatever they were wrapping around this center, it was just filled with sawdust. So you'd have like a face full of sawdust after hitting a pop foul that the catcher obviously couldn't handle because only the cover of the ball came down with the stitches all busted out. Crazy. Japanese hardball. I don't know if you guys ever experienced that. All right. We'll see you next time on the morning briefing. For Mike Lubie Lubitz, I'm Jeff DeForest. Thanks so much, people, for tuning in here on NoFilter.net.